It's all about war.
Right. It's all about war. But this is a war with real results. I want to start a little bit back so that we have a full continuity. 5 lines from the bottom in Ches, page 102. The Rebbe says in general that there is a principal difference between the two manners of engagement. Everybody knows in two manners of avodah. One is called birurim and one is called nisoyon. They're two different methods. They require completely different approaches. And in brief, he said that birurim, the word birurim means to clear out, purify, which implies that you actually have to get involved with that which you are clarifying, that which you are purifying. You can't be away from it and just declare it to be clear. You have to get into it. Thus, birurim requires that one get involved with that thing that he is mivarer. In other words, if there is anything impure and unclean about it, he has to get down, so to speak, on the hands and knees and start scrubbing. That's birurim. By wanting the floor to be clean, it's not going to be clean. By insisting that it's clean, it's not going to become clean. You have to actually go down and clean it. This is a simple illustration of birurim that clearly pnimiziki birurim is a real avodah, and it requires to get involved and identify that which is impure, that which needs to be cleared out, and find the way to do that and clean it out, which is going to explain more in detail in the following, what we're going to follow now. In contrast, nisoyon is an entirely different situation. Nisoyon, there is nothing to purify. Because the whole situation of nisoyon is an illogical situation. It isn't that you have something in the world that needs to be elevated and needs to be purified. It's something which needs to be eliminated. And thus, in the avodah of nisoyon, the major occupation is finding the strength to stand up in Israel. It's an internal struggle, finding personal strength to stand up for it and not to be swayed, not to be affected by the situation. That's what Israel is. If a person if he got to daven mincha and the time is coming, and he's in the big airport, and everything is going around, and he feels uncomfortable to stand up over there, even in a corner to daven. Who knows who's going to observe him? They'll think he's off the wall, and he lost his mind, and he's flying someplace. That's an Israel. He's not going to go around to all the people and say, listen, I'm not insane. I'm really okay. He's going to, he has to get in his soil and stand up there and daven. The davening itself is birurim, because this is where he has to be able to concentrate and forget about his environment, forget the outside, and concentrate and do the davening as best as he can. So here we have, so to speak, a situation of birurim under the circumstances of nisoyin.
You said earlier that there is a nitzuz from Teilu that fell in. It's not similar to the nitzuz between the nitzuz in Birim and the nitzuz in Nisayin. So there is a spark there, but it's not our job to refine it, so to speak. It's
The spark. No, it is definitely our job, but it's not a question of refining. The spark of nisoyin is drawn out not by refining, but by standing up to it. When one stands up in the example that I gave, in the middle of an airport, and he knows it's time to daven, and he stands up and davens, regardless of what difficulties, how he feels, the prayer mamish, what is his declaration? Where does he get the strength on it? He gets the strength by recognizing that even though all of these people over here don't know what's going on, and they're involved in their businesses, and they think that the airport is the greatest thing that ever happened to human beings, and this is standing up over here is not recognizing our great achievement. He knows the truth. He knows the truth. He knows that the real thing is the godly presence in the world. And this airport does not replace that in any which way, does not minimize it, does not hide it, does not camouflage it. This airport itself is representative of the greatness of God's greatness. If not for that greatness, there would be no such an entity. And therefore, you can't obliviate. You can't be unaware of the godly presence and be in an airport. Because without the God, there's no airport doesn't exist.
Be oblivious.
Yeah, you can't obliviate the godly presence and be in the airport. So he knows, yes, the airport is such and such, and people don't know what he's doing, but the Rebbeinu is there.
You said declaration? What's the declaration? That's is there two different things? Recognizing?
No, by recognizing, he's declaring. His actions declare that this entire confusion or whatever misrepresentation that the airport may cause to people is a total error. The godly truth hasn't changed whatsoever. On the contrary, this is what sustains it. This is what makes it be. Clearly, at the same time, he has to do it in a manner that won't create a chilul Hashem, that he won't make a fool of himself. He stands with the recheres and davens. That's what he has to do. And this is where that spark comes out. Just by doing the opposite. Okay, so now, as I said, I'm going to start 5 lines from the bottom on page 102. He explains now the inyan of birurim specifically, and later on the inyan of nisoyin specifically. V'yodua b'inyan habirurim. Regarding the inyan of birurim, it is known sheheim b'derech milchama, that birurim also have to be conducted b'derech milchama in a manner of warfare. The namo apum charbo leichel. The expression of the Gemara is namo. Namo means bread in Aramaic. Namo, bread. Apum charbo, on the sharp of cherev. Cherev is a sword. On the sharp of a sword, leichel, That's how you eat bread. In other words, you don't eat bread without recognizing and contemplating. Where does it come from? You're not just eating bread, like we said, eating bread from the ground, but eating bread that God gave you, that Hashem gave you. That requires an internal war. That's what makes a bracha. And you eliminate from your mind the thought, I'm eating bread because it's there on the table. It's not there on the table. It becomes bread after you make a bracha for it. And that it requires war. An internal, a personal war. Because the inclination of the Nefesh HaBahamis is to say, I don't know what you're talking about. Here's the bread. This particular aspect we discussed over several times. I'm not going to go any further, any more on it.
This is a minor, or this is a good thing, or a bad thing? I remember a pasuk about one of the. It says al mi ne'emar al chardecha tochal lachem.
What?
Al chardecha tochal lachem. It says about
Esav.
Esav.
Right.
Yes, in my head it's like.
Not lechem. Achar b'chotichya. By Esav it says, Yitzchak gave Esav bracha al char b'chotichya. B'zeh yasapech otech al lechem. That was the kloler that the Odom Rishon received after the Chetes Hadas. That to eat bread you'll have to sweat.
So that's a punishment, or it's actually a reward in a way.
No.
Al-Panav is a punishment.
Yeah, and this is also, in other words, because that the kedusha in the bread is now concealed, therefore, to eat bread properly, you have to go through war. So, if you want to eat bread without the war, you're eating bread without kedusha. The bezeyas apech oteichal lechem is a klola to Odom Rishon. But it wasn't just a klola out of the blue. Everybody understands what I'm talking about?
I don't know the mikveh. I don't know how it's a curse.
What?
I guess you're going to explain it.
Why it's a curse?
So far, you understand what I said? Elad asked, it says over here, that Nama Pum Char B'Teichel. That this is the proper way to eat bread on the sharp of a sword. So he says, but actually in the Torah this is expressed as a curse. So I'm explaining that yes, indeed, it's expressed as a curse, but this curse was not a curse that was given just out of the blue, just to make Odom suffer someplace. So Rebbe just said, okay, here's what it is. From now on, if you want to eat bread, you'll have to sweat. That's not the point. The point is that because that as a result of the Chet Eitz Hadas, that's what I'm asking. Everybody knows what I'm referring to.
Before you didn't have to do this avoid.
Okay, one second. As a result, Chet Eitz Hadas, everybody knows. As a result of the Chet Eitz Hadas, the Gashmius, the Gashmius of the world, became real to Odom Rishon. Before that, he saw the Gashmius, but he saw how the Gashmius represents godliness. He didn't conceal godliness to him. But now, as a result of Eitz Hadas, he got Das in Gashmius. The Gashmius itself became real. So the Rebbe on the contrary, the Rebbe Hashem gave him a curse. But this curse is really inherently a blessing. Because if not for this curse, he would have bread without sweat, then nothing would force him out of the Gashmius. What? Sweat. Effort. Yeah. Without hard labor. then he could drown in Auschwitz. We know it till this very day. Baruch Hashem, it's 5,000 years later, but we know till this very day that a person who gets everything without effort is not necessarily a bracha. On the contrary, when a person works hard, not Hashem that we are asking for this, whatever, the Eibusher gives a person a challenge that he has to work hard, that is for his good. That brings out the best qualities in him. And that gives him, it brings das, as we're learning here. It brings an appreciation of what it is, what the world is about, what life is about. So this is, yes, it came as a curse, but this curse came as an antidote. You know what an antidote? As a counter medicine for the place, for his fall down. V'haschol as hamilchomo, and the starting point of the war, hu bitfilo, is in davening. The inyana, where the inyan, the function and the purpose of tefillah and davening, who is lahachlish koyach hanefesh habahamis, to weaken, to soften the koyach of the nefesh habahamis, v'lifoil bo habitul, and to affect in the nefesh habahamis habitul, the aspect of bitul. So the Rebbe is going to go a little bit more in detail. I just want to lay it out even on the surface. When a person comes to davening, and the simple meaning of davening is that you come to Hashem and you ask Him for your needs. It's called bakoshas rochav. You're praying for your needs. That's the simplest, superficial thing. The very fact that the nefesh habahamis has to be forced, has to be told, listen, you have to ask. What is that? What is the impression? What does that do to the person, to the nefesh habahamis? It gives him to recognition that he is not everything. He's not going to do it on his own. He has to ask for everything. Asking for everything itself, that itself weakens him, softens him up. So this is, as I said, this is the most superficial aspect of tefillah. The deeper, the more encompassing union of tefillah is not just like be prepared to feel. This tefillah is the Menasse that we ask for all the brachas that we need, for das, for forgiveness, for because Hashonim we should have a blessed year, for refuah, for health, and all these things that we ask. But how do we prepare for davening? We say all the Psuki de Zimra. Psuki de Zimra, the Hoidu, Baruch She'omar, Ashrei, and Amos Yoshir, and all that. What is this all about? This is for making us conscious and aware that this great, beautiful, first of all, we become aware as human beings, intelligent human beings, that there is a beautiful world, and we are aware that this beautiful world really is all representing Hashem's presence. It's beautiful because Hashem is in it. Otherwise, it would just be a meaningless heap. All the beauty in the world comes as it represents Hashem's presence, it represents Hashem's kingdom and Hashem's glory. This is why the world is so beautiful. And that transforms or it changes one's view, perspective on the whole world. That's a very profound, deep effect on the Nefesh HaBahamis. The Behema, there's a word from the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe from this Maimer. The Rebbe said, what is a Behema? A Behema can walk and trample. Huh? Okay? On the most valuable things. It can even trample on living thing, on a person, and be totally unaware what it's doing. It doesn't know the difference what it's doing. If a behemoth has to go and get its hay to eat, it can trample over anything.
This is what the
Friedrich said. You know the expression, a buffalo in a glass shop? Huh?
A bull in a china shop.
He doesn't know the difference. This is a beautiful piece of china. What are you talking about? So even to recognize and appreciate that there are things in this world, not things that pertain to you. Look, the sun rises, so what does that have to do with me? Nothing to do with you. Just to appreciate the world we live in, and to recognize that this all represents a creator who planned it, who made it for our benefit, so that we should appreciate beauty and glory. That itself is already affecting the Nefesh HaBahamis. It transforms from a behemoth to somewhat of a human being. So he says in general that in Tefillah this is the beginning of Milchama, and the function is to soften, weaken the Nefesh HaBahamis. And as we explained last time, that this is in fact essentially what a Milchama is. War has two qualities to it. On the one hand, you recognize the enemy. You're not standing away. You're not ignoring. If you ignore the enemy is going to swallow you up. You have to recognize him. But on the other hand, when you recognize him, your whole function and aim is to weaken him and either to destroy him or to weaken him, so that he will not come and attack you. That's what war is about. And this is the pshat that the Avedas HaBirurim Mistrum Milchama. In other words, if we allow the Nefesh HaBahamis to be what it is, and we give in, or you like this, you like this, you like this, and say whatever you want, that's what you get. This is like giving in to your enemy. In order to understand, that the greatness and the glory in the world is representative of the Creator, representative of God, one has to a little bit separate himself from the taivas, because the nefesh of the behemoth couldn't care less where the food comes from. It's food. I like the food. Finish. Forget it. So you tell him, wait a second. Don't grab the food. You know where he got it from. So the Nefesh HaBahamis says, I don't care. I don't care. Like the Arabs said to Avram. Avram said, you should bless the one who gave you the food. And they said, okay, thank you. He said, no, that's not what I mean. Be real. This is the process of weakening the Nefesh HaBahamis. And this weakening of the Nefesh HaBahamis facilitates. Everybody knows what facilitates. It makes it possible for a person to recognize the godly presence in the world and godly presence in his life. As long as the Nefesh HaBahamis is in full force, it's impossible to recognize godliness. It's possible for one to know and give proof that God created the world, but not to recognize person that has to do with him. Or this is something that affects his own life. Because he's interested like a behemoth. Give him my food and forget about everything else. That's why there is in Yom Milchama. The Zehu, and this beetle, and this weakening of the Nefesh HaBahamis is accomplished alidei ha'hizbonenus, as through the process of hizbonenus, of reflecting. I'll come back to what hizbonenus in a minute. B'inyonim ko'elu, reflecting on things of the kind of things hashayochim lahanefesh habamis, things that actually can relate. Shayochim, they're relating to nefesh habamis, things that the nefesh habamis really recognizes. If you think about things which are above world, the nefesh habamis goes to sleep and he's not involved. You have to talk about things that the nefesh habamis relates to. Things that shayochim nefesh habamis. And therefore, Shagam Hu, so that he too, the Nefesh HaBahamis too, Yovin as Ho'inyan Ho'eliki. That the Nefesh HaBahamis also should understand the godly principle involved. Inyan Ho'eliki. This is the first, the avoider of Beetle Nefesh HaBahamis. You have a question?
Yeah, this whole opinion of bittul of the Nefesh HaBahamis and this is all nisoyim, not birurim, right?
No, this is birurim.
It's birurim. So how can you told us that birurim is an external war as opposed to nisoyim, which is an internal war, right?
No,
so this seems like an internal war.
It's an internal war in the sense that you are affected in Nefesh HaBahamis, you're weakening Nefesh HaBahamis. But what are you accomplishing? What is your aim? That the Nefesh HaBahamis should understand that the world is godly.
Okay.
In other words, those things that Nefesh HaBahamis relates to.
So through combating what's around you that relates to the Nefesh HaBahamis, you weaken your...
To Nefesh HaBahamis, right? If you tell Nefesh HaBahamis, before you eat, you have to make sure it's kosher, and you have to wash your hands, make sure the food is clean, and make sure you eat in a proper and all these minimal restrictions. In the meantime, you're holding him on a leash. You don't let him run out like a wild beast. That is weakening Nefesh HaBahamis. And if you, I'm sorry?
It's an internal brewery.
In that respect, it's internal, but as a result of that, the Nefesh HaBahamis comes to recognize that this food comes from someplace. And that's what the Abba says, that you have to be Mizboin. I'll come to what Mizboin. I said, in Inyonim, Hashayochim Nefesh HaBahamis. To Inyonim that Nefesh HaBahamis can relate to. Nefesh HaBahamis understands food. So now you tell him, okay, what is food? So at first he rebels and he says, I don't care. So you tell him, if you don't care, you don't eat. And that's how, and you force him in your mizboinei, and you reflect until the Nefesh HaBahamis also can understand. And you show him, listen, there's a difference between this and that, between an apple and the tree. Why is the difference? This was made to be food, so who made it? You know, all of these things that you mizboinei, that make him also reflect and see that there is a real world. It's not an accident. I want to discuss briefly the term hisboinus. Huh? The term hisboinus. Hisboinus does not refer to learning. In other words, Hisbonenus comes after you learn. You already know all of this stuff. Like for instance, we daven every day, and we say all the halalukas, and we relate in the halalukas, we enumerate all the things that Hashem does in the world. We did it yesterday, we did it the day before yesterday, we did it for 365 days ago. We already did it hundreds and hundreds of times. So we're not learning anything new. Hisbonenus means a personal reflection. Hisbonenus means to personally relate to that which you know. To understand personally, understand that how this is real to me. As simple as it is, as simple as it sounds, this is a real challenge. It's not simple at all. Because the minute you start thinking on a personal level and you ask yourself the question, do I really recognize that this apple was intended for me to eat by God? You will say, no, I don't see that. I don't see it at all. This apple came from a tree. I know the truth, but that's not my personal truth. Hisbonenus means that one reflects on the personal level. Says, yes, this is what it really means. And in order to come, just to understand this simple principle, one has to go through and battle with his own mind, battle in his own heart, all the things that prevent him from recognizing this simple truth. Again, it's not that he doesn't believe it. It's not that he doesn't understand it logically. When we're talking about to personally experiencing, personally relating to, it's a completely different story. This is why it is possible for a person to be a scholar in the real sense of the word and know an enormous amount and be as lowly as someone who has never opened a book in his own personal view of things, because he never personally reflected on it. However, the capability of this hisbonenus, and more importantly, the possibility of us understanding these inyonim personally, this is what defines us as human beings. Not the ability to prove things and figure things out. It is the ability to experience it personally and say, yes, this is in fact the way things are. This is what defines us as human beings. This is what brings out the real human quality, both that it's a human nefesh abamis, and then as a result of that, we can relate even to nefesh olekis. Without that, we can know everything and know the answer to every question. And in effect, we haven't used our human qualities at all.
Is it possible though, because a person knows, a person believes Hashem made this apple for me to eat, and a person has even learned all the steps that Hashem contracted himself and he filled the world with this light, and then the world was created and the tree was created and this tree grew and it's imbued into a spark, and when I take the spark I make the bracha and I refine it. He knows, he can work himself through all the steps and he believes that it's true, but how does he bridge those together to actually seeing it, so to speak? I mean, if a person with all that knowledge, I mean, how does merely just thinking about it, what gets created through that thought that all of a sudden, oh, it's clear to me now, I can see it?
You mean, what is the process?
Yeah, how does a person go about...
He asks himself the tough questions. is this something which I myself see, or is this something which I know from a book? And then if I don't, why is it? What's preventing me from seeing it? It's true. And he'll inevitably, as we're going to see, find that he personally is involved in the lowest of the low. I don't mean to insult anybody because it's his personal insult as well. Sometimes when you reflect, you get shocked to realize where you stand. Yeah, I'm a scholar and I'm learning, but what am I into? What am I really interested in? Where do I stand? What does the world mean to me? You find out that personal satisfaction is primary. And this is the way I see the world, so no matter how much I understand, it still remains the same world. And this is what his oneness does. You have to reflect on it, bring it to the fore, make it real, and then ask yourself the tough questions. Why don't I really realize this? Even for the moment.
But don't mean make it real.
I'm sorry?
But don't mean make it real like
I'm sorry.
What do you mean, make it real, he said?
What make it real?
Yeah,
Make it real means that it becomes your personal view, not a view that you learned in a book.
I have to make it like every single time to say to myself, oh, there's God left, or there's God left.
Well, the thing is, that's exactly what we're talking about. Not every single time. We're talking about the time of avodah. I'm saying davening. What is davening? Davening is to weaken the nefesh habayis. Take a little bit away from the coarseness of the nefesh habayis. A little bit. If a person is misboinen in davening, and he gets a certain, even a little bit of a sense that yes, this is, even for the moment, that this is really the way things are, that has softened up his nefesh habayis. At the minimum, he's no longer going to think, I'm perfect. He'll recognize where he really stands, which is a tremendous thing.
Even though it vanishes the next moment.
I'm sorry?
Even if it vanishes the next moment.
Even if it vanishes the next moment, right. One moment of pure experience is a tremendous effect. Has a tremendous long-lasting effect. And then, of course, he's not going to give up next day. But that's what it is.
Is that the hair?
No, that's not the head. That's the understanding. That's just like in learning. When you learn something, the next time you learn the same thing, you understand it a little better, right? Even though it's the same thing, but you have a different perspective. You have a more greater clarity. In avoid is the same thing. If you went through it once, it opens up your mind, opens up your heart.
That's the understanding.
I'm sorry.
This is the understanding. You get this shot, let's say.
What we're talking about over here is not the understanding.
Can I ask you something? I don't know if it may not be, maybe not for this year, but how this understanding is brought down into the hair in the way that it says in Hayom Yom in that day of the different levels of the bonus that you're supposed to do. You sit in a Hasidus chair, or you learn your Balabasish, you learn a piece of Hasidus, you get up you can work on, or you sit in a chair for an hour, and then you have a little break, have a half an hour break to daven, and in that time, what is specific to do to bring it to the level of the hair that they say that I davened, what did you daven with? I've been davening this for the last so-and-so amount of time with this marmor, with this piece of tiny, with this.
All right. Let's just pursue.
That's another.
Well, I'm explaining what his bonus is. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
But that's his bonus, isn't it?
Okay, I'll explain it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's say one was born and then he went through this phase of contemplating, realizing, let's say he reaches a certain positive feeling about it, about this realism, about what's the next phase? It's supposed to cause what? Change
That itself that is what makes God real to him.
That's
Yes,
bottom line?
the bottom line of davening, yes.
Oh, davening.
Davening. The bottom line of davening is that you're davening to Hashem. You're not saying words. You're not being yotze, paying your dues, but you're davening to Hashem.
And that should not lead you to change your behavior?
Of course, it leads automatically to change your behavior. It leads to greater refinement.
Where
It leads to
Tikkun HaMidos
greater
comes
Yerushalayim. Huh?
in this process, where Tikkun HaMidos comes in, after, before, through the
In
process.
general, okay, this is in general, Tikkun HaMidos starts from this Chelishus Nefesh Habamis,
What's Felicia?
weakening.
A weakening.
Because as long as Nefesh Habamis is betokfoy, he can't be Misak in the Midas. Once Nefesh Habamis is affected, is weakened a little bit, then you can start working on Tikkun HaMidos. But this is a separate thing, yeah.
So this whole process of this boinus, it's a method of internalizing, right? It's like the same idea as like you take the idea and you internalize it so that it becomes part of you. Take it abstract.
I'll tell you.
You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. The question of internalizing, or however other terminology you'll use, I don't want to go into this right now. I prefer, however, that you use the terminology that I'm using and try to relate to that. Because the minute you start going on internalization, it could mean all kinds of different things. What I'm saying is, you're misboinen in the reality of that which you learned.
That
Which you learned. That's what you're saying. You see our big world, yes, you say, Hoydal Hashem Kiru Vishmei, because he is the one who made it. Baruch She'omer V'Hodio Ha'ila. Just be misboinen in that. Whatever, so to speak, strikes you, so to speak, you know what I'm saying? But it should be just in that. So whether it's internalizing into yourself, or it is you relating to it, it's a separate discussion.
So is it the hair? That's a whole other discussion.
Yes. So he says that the starting point is to be misboinen in tefillah the yonim that are shaykh to nefesh habamis, that he too should hu yovin as oin eliki, that the nefesh habamis also should understand this, the godly principle involved. And as we discussed many, many times, it's not as simple as it sounds. As a matter of fact, it's very much away from not simple. Because the way the Nefesh Habamis sees the world, the way the Nefesh Habamis sees an apple, is that it's tasty. And it does not occur to him, the whole Indian, that God said, let there be an apple. He doesn't see it at all. And he doesn't care. You have to get him to care. At least to relate to it. The Aveda Protis, the Rebbe explains more further this principle he just now explained. The principle is that you have to be misboinen in those inyonim that the Nefesh Habamis can understand, that pertain to it, in his world. You have to get it down into his world. To think about how great God is, that's another thing. First you have to think about the world that Nefesh Habamis is into, and understand the truth about it. And take it away from him. The Aveda Protis who? Because Aveda Protis means Aveda on a specific level. What is the principle of specificity? Specific means that you are trying to really accomplish something. Not that you're learning about something and you find out. The idea is you're trying to accomplish something. In order to accomplish something, you really have to do the specific. Just like if you build a table, you have to know exactly the size of the board, where the legs go, and how big the nail is. It has to be very, very specific. Otherwise, it's going to be crooked. That's my spirit. Way to put this. In order to affect the nefesh habahamis, it has to be very specific. That's called avodah. When is avodah kasher? Ho'avedo hiu b'shnoi inyonim. When is it avodah protis, which has a real lasting effect, or real effect? It is b'shnei inyonim. When it is on two levels, it involves two aspects. Ho'alev, the first thing is the avodah soitihiyeh, that his avodah must be ba'oisom ho'inyonim, in those inyonim, involving those inyonim, those aspects, shehem chesroine hanefesh habahamis shaloi, the shortcomings of his own nefesh habahamis. He has to identify where his nefesh habahamis is, where he is a behemoth, so to speak, and deal with those things. The kol echad v'yechad, because every individual person, harei yesh lo inyonim proti, so clearly he has an individual inyonim. Hein, he has individual inyonim that are his own problems, so to speak. Hein inyonim, whether they be inyonim. Hein means whether, either. Inyonim hanoigim b'moichin, that relate to moichin, relate to the mind. V'hein inyonim hanoigim b'midos, or inyonim that pertain to midos. We'll come back to this in a moment. Shehem machoivov horuchnim haproti. Shehem, these are machoivov, the pains and the sickness, his own sicknesses, his own problems, horuchnim, his own spiritual pains and sicknesses, haproti, individual. Kefi asher yoda inosh benafshi. Kefi, as asher yoda, as inosh, as a human being knows, benafshoy, in his own nefesh. Doesn't have to be pronounced, doesn't have to be announced to anyone, but every person knows his own spiritual problems. And he has to actually apply himself to these problems. Whether it be in Yonim Bey, he says, b'moichin or b'midas. B'moichin, in general, even though we're talking about specifics, just we also want to put things down, what we're talking about. B'moichin means that his understanding of things is not, his personal understanding of things is not according to the way the truth is. This is a very, very painful thing. When one finds it difficult, as for Shalom, to understand Gracious Borah Elokim Hashemayim v'Ha'aretz, that's a very big sickness. That's a very painful thing. And one cannot ignore it. One has to pursue it and make it clear that his moichin are clear. Moichin is the primary thing. Or b'midos. Or he has machayvim in midos, which is not the same degree, the same level of moichin. But nevertheless, these are things that a person has to become aware of. Whatever, I don't want to enumerate from Chassom to touch anybody. I'm saying everybody knows I can't stand him. I can't stand him. That's a midrash. That's a midrash. Even if you take it very simply, what the Rebbe Shem Gemara, the Rebbe Shem made him, the Rebbe Shem made you. You know, you have your world. How was he take anything away from you? On the contrary, you have to accept everybody that the Rebbe Shem made. Or if he needs help, go help him. But I can't stand it. That's not a proper human being. I mean, give you an example that sometimes people proudly say, "Oh, I can't stand him," and he doesn't realize that he's actually confessing a midrash. If he says it's a big rachmanis on him, he needs help, I understand. But if he says I can't stand him, and look what a proud person, I'm so healthy, I'm so good, I can't stand him. That's expressing his own sickness. And everybody, and this, I mean, we are talking about if one wants to become a full-fledged human being. A little bit, full-fledged human being, he has to reflect where his moichin is, how his mind, how he understands things, Torah things, Kedusha, godly things, how well he can relate to them, not how deeply and how big his head is. That depends. The Rebbe gave everybody his mind. But he can readily understand. It's not something which he rejects. Like I mentioned many times before, that it never happened that a Rebbe should teach in Cheder to children, and the child should say, Rebbe, I don't understand it. I never thought, I thought otherwise. I thought, it makes sense to every child. But then, when he gets involved and becomes a little bit more selfish, and a little bit more involved in the world, all of a sudden he finds it difficult. And he can't, God is intruding into my world. What does he want? Let him be where he is. Let me take care of my world. This is in Moichin. That's a real problem that needs to be dealt with. But in Midas, this is also. One has to fight with this Midas. The truth is that if one does not challenge his Midas, it's much more difficult to deal with the Moichin. Moichin is much more difficult to deal with. So if he is proud, it's very difficult to affect this Moichin. So if he softens himself up a little bit, and he understands that this Midah is not a good Midah, then he can open his mind, can be opened up also to understand finer things.
These faults are what a person was pointing on. This is one of the types of ways that a person can.
Yeah.
So, but if a person needs a mishpia, because generally he can't give himself a true self-evaluation. He's too close to himself to be able to make his own important decisions, and even he doesn't see his own traits. So how can a person hope to seriously be pointing on his own bad traits when the best he'll let himself off easy? And the person has, okay, I've got bad traits. Okay, but they're not so bad. I've got my reasons. This person does this. And how can I...
Well, this is what we're saying. Now, this is what avoid the protest is. And if he can't narrow himself down to avoid the protest, then of course he has to go to Mashpia and say, listen, I can't relate to this whole thing. So then they plan out, a path of attack, so to speak. But the idea over here is avoid the protest. A person is responsible. A person recognizes. We can go through the world, we can go through our lives, with 120 years, with all our spiritual sicknesses. There are people who can't hold down a job. So he gets a job, he works it a month, and then gets fired, so he goes and finds another job. And it doesn't bother him. It doesn't bother him. It bothers him when he doesn't have a job. But it doesn't reflect on himself. What's going on? get along with people. Doesn't bother you. So if one is confronting himself and saying, not for the sake of job, I'm talking about Avodas Hashem, but this is all in the same vein, essentially. One reflects on himself, listen, I was made a human being, and I was given a holy neshama, and I have to fulfill my function as a human being and as a yid. And fulfilling this function does not only mean that I mumble the words of the bracha and I go my way. It means that I can relate to the inyanim of Torah, to whatever degree. That's when avodah begins. Avodah pretends. To say that everyone does it, I can assure you that it's not. I don't have to assure you. Yourself probably have observed that it's not universal. But that's what is incumbent. It's necessary. It's obligatory on every yid to reflect and to be what's called, especially Chassidus. That's what Chassidus demands. Chassidus requires that you be a living Jew, not just a functioning Jew. Functionally, a computer can do things better than a human being, but the computer doesn't live. And the human being lives. It's incomparable. So if you're just a functioning Jew, where is your neshama? Then the computer outdoes him 100 times. Who needs you? Don't laugh. I had a conversation like this. It's a real story. Somebody called me up from Toronto, I think it is. Okay? This lady started going to higher education, quote unquote. She got into some college, and she started studying whatever it is, psychology, I don't know exactly what, and she got so confused. And she called me up, and someone suggested her to call me up, and as she's talking, she explained to me, all with her. So I started asking her questions. In a roundabout way, I showed her that she really does not realize the difference between a computer and a human being. It's not a joke.
What do you mean
she doesn't realize? I mean, you know what Chochmas Chitzenius does? It kills away the neshama. Okay, Baruch Hashem, to you this is a joke. It's not a joke. I mean, afterwards, she realized where she's going. It took me some time to get her to admit and to recognize, oh yeah, you're right. This is what happens with Chochmas Tzinius. You get a sickness in your moichin.
She thought a human is a machine. Yeah. She just live life and eat food.
The way they explain the human mind. This is all signals, electrical signals. So what's the difference between the human computer, and a computer? Electronic signals.
What do you mean by Chochmas Chitzenius?
Chochmas Chitzenius means the way you study, you understand.
Law school.
Higher education.
The way you understand things from outside, externally, on the functional level. And you lose sight that there is a neshama behind it. Who needs a neshama? The computer can do the same thing, so why not the human being? God made a very complex computer. Okay? And this is a personal experience. I actually had to go through step by step and have the patience but this is not a joke. This is possible in human mind. And a person has to examine his mind and know that he has a healthy mind. And he can see the difference, and he can understand the union from gracious, simple principles. And if Chas v'Shalom he has difficulty with it, he has to work on it to become back to life. And the midas. Okay, gentlemen, this is it for today. Everything that was said here is not chas v'sholem to throw anyone into morbid state of mind. On the contrary, to reflect and show what treasures we do have, not what we're missing, what our possibilities are. That the real treasures is the rich neshama that we have, and we just have to go through and take off the dirt that goes on. Right.
So why is it that a child is in existence, although you say not so much involved in the world, plus a child